Hey guys, I'm Mark with Tech Necessity. Today I'm going to be doing a Blender tutorial on how to animate an object along a path. Alright, so a while back I actually did a video tutorial for Blender that basically showed you how to turn a 2D object into a 3D object in Blender, which I'm actually going to use that project for this demo right now that I'm going to do. So if you're interested in seeing that, I'm going to put a link to it up on the screen. Before I get started, if you guys want to subscribe to my channel, like my video, I'd appreciate it. If you're interested in seeing more tutorials on Final Cut Pro, Blender, and Motion, and also some product reviews, please subscribe. Let's get into it. Alright, so today our plan is to show you how you can create a path and then have an object follow that path. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a project that we already had. We created this aperture logo in a project previously. So I'm going to use this project, and then what we're going to do is create a path that kind of weaves in and out of this object, and then create an orb that glows, and we're going to have it follow that path, and you'll see as it moves around how it lights up the different areas of the 3D object. So the first thing I want to do is create a path. I'm going to press Shift A to add a path. So if I go to curve and then down to path, you can see it adds that right there. I'm going to go into my top view by pressing 7 on my numpad, and then I'm going to move this object, this path forward so I can see it. And then you can see there it is right there. So I'm going to move this over to the center, and then if I hit the tab key, you'll see that it actually turns into a path where it's got arrows basically telling you which direction that it's going to be going. So in order to move this around, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on this final vertex right here, and I'm just going to basically have it move around by extruding it. So I'm going to go back into my top view, 7, by pressing 7 on my numpad, and then if I press the E key after selecting this vertex, I can extrude it. Now you notice as I drag this, the arrows get further and further apart. So the further apart they are, the slower it's going to move the object. So if I go to say here, and then I press the left click on my mouse, it will place that there. I can hit extrude again for the E key, extrude that out. I'm just going to keep doing that, pressing E, extruding this out, and then I'm going to have it kind of come around the back side of this object and then go through the middle of it. So in order to make sure I'm doing that, I'm going to press the 1 key on my numpad to go in my front view. You can notice that this path is a little bit low, so if I press the 3 key to go to my side view, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to press the G key to grab this, and I'm going to move it up a little bit so you can see that it's going to come up a little bit. I'm going to go back into my top view by pressing the 7 on my numpad, and then now I'm going to extend this out again. So I'm going to press E to extrude. Now it's going to go through the center of the object. I have it come a little bit closer to the camera, say there, and then what I'm going to have it do is kind of turn around and go back. So as I go, I just keep pushing the E key to keep extruding this path. So now I'm going to have this go back through the center again, and then curve around kind of like this. And then I'm just going to have it go across the camera view and then out of view like this. So as you can see, I've now created a path. It starts here, it goes around, it gets to the back side over here, and then it kind of goes upward a little bit. It curves up, and then it comes out. It goes towards the camera, it goes back around, and then it comes through here again, and then it goes out and then exits over here. So once I've created my path, I'm going to hit the tab key to get out of that. So there's my path, you can see. So now what I want to do is I want to create an object that's going to follow this path. So if I press Shift A again, and I go to Mesh, UV sphere. Now I've got my sphere. I'm going to move this forward a little bit, and then I'm actually going to scale this down. Press the S key, scale it down. Remember, I have to make it small enough that it can go through the center of that aperture 3D object. So I'll go with about that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on it and shade smooth. So now we've got our object. Now what I want to do is I want to place this object right at the beginning of the path right here. So in order to do that, I'm going to go in my top view by pressing 7 on my numpad. I'm going to move it over so that it is right at the beginning of that. I'm going to zoom in. Now, in order to make sure that's right in the center, I'm actually going to go into my wireframe view. So if I click up here, wireframe, and I zoom in, now I can tell the center of it is actually right there. Now, what I want to also do is go into my different views to make sure that it is lined up, because just because it looks like it's lined up from this angle, it could be not in the right spot. So I'm going to press 1 on my numpad to go to my front view, zoom out a little bit. As you can see, still correct here. I'm going to go to my side angle 3. There's my side angle, and it is still correct. So you can see that that sphere is actually right on that dot for the first vertice of that path. So that's what I want. So I'm going to actually tab back, or I'm going to go back into solid mode like that. And then all I need to do now is I need to add a material to this sphere. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to go over to my materials tab. I'm going to click new material. I'm going to name it glow. Okay. And then I'm going to go to my surface and I'm going to change this to emission. So basically I want this orb to emit light. Now in order to be able to see this like in my preview and actually when I render it, I need to change to cycles render. So I'm going to go up to my render tab and I'm going to switch it from Eevee to cycles. Okay, so now if I go back to my materials tab and then I open up my preview, you can tell it's actually starting to glow a little bit there. So I'm going to increase the strength. Let's go up to, I don't know, say 20. You can see how it's starting to light up the area by it. So on this, on my camera view here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change this to rendered view so I can see what it actually looks like. So that's what it actually looks like there. Now, the next thing I want to do is, in order to complete this effect, I want to make sure that I don't have anything, my world is not lighting anything. So if I go to the world tab here, if I click on color here, I drag this all the way down to black, what it's going to do is it's going to make it so that the world is not lighting anything. So if I click here and I move this up, you see that the object actually gets brighter here. So that's because the world is actually lighting it. So if I go to my world, I click on this and I go down to all the way to black. Now the only thing that's lighting this object is this sphere. I take that back because I actually have some lights in this. So what I'm going to do is actually delete these. So I select these different lights by holding the shift key, selecting them, and I'm just going to hit the X key to delete them. So now the only thing lighting my object is my sphere, as you can see down here in the camera view. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is I want to tell this sphere to follow this path. So one thing I need to make sure that I do is when I'm selecting these, I need to select my sphere first and then select the path by holding shift so they're both selected, but make sure you select the sphere first. Now once I've done that, I want to right click on the sphere and go to the parent menu and then go down to follow path. Now if I play this, you'll see that the orb is following that path. Okay, and if you look at my rendered mode over here, you can see that as it flies through there, it is lighting up that object. Now, I actually think it should be a little bit brighter, so I'm going to increase the intensity on the emission of this. So if I select the sphere again and I go to my materials menu, I'm going to change this to 50. Okay, so now it's a little bit brighter, but that's because it's right next to it. So as we scroll through this, you can see it's lighting it up. It's lighting it up when it gets closer. When it gets behind it, you can see that it's actually creating like a glow from behind, because it's actually lighting from behind, and none of the light from that sphere is falling on the front of the object. So it's a really cool effect that you can create. One thing you'll notice as I play this, so if you see, it follows this path. Now I'm going to pause it when it gets to the end of the path, which is there. So if you can tell, it only went to 104 frames, or actually probably more, about 100 frames, even though my project is set to 160 frames. And the reason why this is because I need to tell it how long I want it to take to animate along this path. So if I select the path here, and then I go to my path menu, and I scroll down to the bottom, path animation right here. So if I open this up, right now it's set to 100 frames. So it's only going to follow this path in 100 frames. Now, if it was a longer path, the object would move faster because it only has 100 frames to move along that entire path. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to say 200 frames, and then I need to change my endpoint down here to 200 frames. And now what will happen is this object will animate along this path, but it'll take 200 frames to do it, so it'll go half as fast as it was going before. So if I push play, you can see now it's moving around that object, but it's moving quite a bit slower, which is good. So also keep in mind, right now it's just emitting a white light, and the reason why this is lighting up blue is because it's a blue object. Now if I had a white object, I could change the color of this sphere, then it would change the color that it was lighting up the object. So let's just say, just to show you, if I select the sphere and I go back to my materials tab and I change the color to say purple or pink, more of a pinkish color, you can see when it lights up the object, it lights it up with a more of a pink color. Now because it's not white, I might want to increase this a little bit, so I'll make it say, I'll double it to 100. And now as it moves through this object here, you can see that it casts a pinker shadow on the object, or a pinker light on the object. I'm going to keep that at white though, because I think white looks good. Okay, so now we're white again. And I'm going to decrease the strength back to 50. Alright, so now that I've got this set up to animate along this path, all I have to do now is export. And the way that I have this set up right now is I actually have it set up to have a transparent background. You don't have to have a transparent background, but it might actually look cool if you add a background, because then you'll see some more shadows. So, let's go ahead and do that real quick. If I go into my over here and I hit Shift A again and I add a mesh plane, I'm going to rotate this on the x-axis 90 degrees. So press R, X, 90, enter. I'm going to go to my top view and move this back. Remember, I need to make it go back far enough so that it is not going to be in this path. So if I move it to about there, so that the orb will not be going behind the object, and then I scale it up. Let's go to the one view. Alright, I'm going to scale this up by pressing the S key just to create a background, and I'm going to make it big enough so that it covers the entire camera view. And now as you can see, what it's doing is it's actually casting a shadow on the background. First I have to add a surface to this, or a material to this background. So when it's selected, I'm going to go down to my materials tab. I'm going to click there. I'm just going to create a basic white material for the background. So I'm just going to name it background. Alright, so now I have a basic white material back here. If you wanted to make it more metallic or more make it reflective, you could do that. Might actually give you a cool effect, but then you wouldn't see as many shadows. So I kind of like this shadow effect that we got going on. So if I play this now, or I scroll through it, you can see in my rendered view that it adds quite a bit to it, because now you can see the light coming from behind, and as it goes past it, you see that it creates this cool looking shadow on that surface behind it. So I kind of like the way that looks. So you know what, I'm going to go ahead and keep that just because I think it looks cool. Alright, so once I've done that, once I have this set up, you can see my scene over here. So this is all set. I've animated my orb. I put in my background. My camera position is correct. Everything is framed up. Now all I need to do is export it. So the way that I'm going to export it is, what I like to do when I export things is I like to do it frame by frame. I don't like to create a movie with it, because then sometimes, you know, occasionally, it doesn't happen very often, but if your computer crashes in the middle of creating that movie export, then you lose everything. But if you're doing a image sequence render where you're rendering out one frame at a time, if your computer crashes, you only have to start re-rendering it from where you left off. So because this is 200 frames and it is a full frame, I'm not going to render this out at full quality just because it would take a long time. So I'm going to go into my rendered menu. Right now it's set to 100. I'm just going to change this to 50 to render the output, just because it doesn't need to be extremely high quality, just because it's a demo. If I was going to be using this for my projects and in a video I was actually creating, I would definitely render it out at a higher level. But because of the way that we're just doing this as a demo, 50 should be fine, just to give you an idea of what it's going to look like. So in order to do that now, what I need to do is go into my my render menu. I'm going to change this. Right now it's set to 1920 by 1080. In order to, once again, make it go a little bit faster, I'm actually going to change this 100%. I'm going to change this to 50, just so it'll be about half size of what it would normally be. But it'll still be good enough for me to show you what it looks like. Right now it's set to 24 frames per second, which is fine. Everything else looks good. Oh, down here. So this is where you'd select. Right now it's already currently set up to do this because this is what I always do. But I'm going to change my output location. So if I click this little button here, you can see it pops up. This was a previous render that I did. I'm actually going to get out of this. These are my Blender image sequences that I output. So I'm going to add a folder. I'm going to name it orbs, or just orb. And then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to name this orb path. Okay, and I accept that. So now I've chosen my output sequence, or my output location, where I'm going to store these still images that I'm going to create by outputting this. And what I'm going to do now is right here is where you would normally select it. So if I wanted to output just a video, I could click here and I could select one of these different types of movie video outputs. But I don't want to do that. I'm going to keep it as a PNG. I usually use PNG because it will support the transparency that I normally do with these types of things. And if you're using transparency and you want to create a transparent background with whatever you're outputting, make sure you select RGBA, because the A is the alpha channel. So you can do regular RGB for this particular output. I could just do regular RGB because I don't have any transparency that I need for this. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. Compression is fine. Post-processing. So the other thing I want to do, whenever you're outputting with cycles, this is something I've learned just recently. And it makes things a heck of a lot better. So if you go into this tab here and you go down to the bottom, there's this little menu that says denoising. So this is not normally checked. So if you go into this menu and you click this, what it's going to do is when you render this output, it's actually going to get rid of all the little specks of light. We call them fireflies. Get rid of those little dots. It's just going to make it a lot clearer image. You will sacrifice a bit of the resolution and the detail, but ultimately it is a better way to do it because you get a better output. So now that I've got all that selected, what I'm going to do real quick just to make sure that this looks good is I'm just going to render one frame. So if I go up to my render menu and I go to render image, I just want to get an idea of what this looks like. And plus, by doing this, what it's going to do is it's going to show me how long it's going to take to render out this entire image. Because if I'm rendering it out one frame at a time, it's going to tell me like 200 frames. If it takes, say, I don't know, it looks like it's probably going to take maybe a minute to export one frame. So that means it's going to take me 200 minutes to export this entire sequence. But if you look, you see how these little dots here? As it renders these out, and then it goes back over it, and it does this denoising to get rid of those little dots. So you can see they disappear, and it makes it definitely look a lot clearer than it would without that. Alright, so that's done exporting or rendering that frame. As you can see, it's not the greatest of quality. It's a 720 image, or it's a half of a 1920 by 1080 image, and it's outputted at only 50 in my cycles render. So it's not going to be extremely high quality, but just to give you an idea of what it's going to look like, it's not bad. So what I'm going to do now, I'm happy with that for now. I'm just going to go up to, and just to make it easier on the computer, I'm actually going to turn off the rendered view on this, because then it won't be working trying to render that while it's exporting. So once I've got that all done, all my outputs are set, everything's good, I go up to my render menu and I click render animation. And now this is going to run until it's done, and I'm going to fast forward that so you don't have to watch the entire thing. Alright, now that I'm done rendering this out, if I want to watch what I did, I can close this window and I can go up to render, view animation. And as you can see, there is our animation we created. Well, if this video was helpful for you, please like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time on Tech Necessity.